Hello, everyone, wherever you are, and thank you for joining us for another climate talk by Puerto Protocol. Thank you, Caroline, Michele, and Nicole. As usual, before we dig in our climate talk, I will introduce Puerto Protocol for those tuning in for the first time. We are an international foundation founded by Taylor Sport, and we are building an open platform of climate solutions spread across the wine value chain. Today, we have a community of more than 200 members spread across the wine value chain from different wine regions, sizes, and stages of climate action that are sharing what they are doing to address climate crisis. Among the various projects we are engaged in, I want to briefly mention two projects that we are actively developing. Our carbon management workshop that started yesterday with a group of people from the whole wine value chain and different wine regions. The stakes are high as we had an extremely insightful and interactive session. Another project that we're slowly kicking off is a project named 101 Actions for Climate, co-authored by each of our members and a few players outside our community. So if you haven't been contacted yet by us, chances are you will be in the near future to make sure we launch the most comprehensive collection of solutions from and to the wine community. So stay tuned for more. And of course, our climate talks are always our most important and visible tool in fulfilling our mission. A forum where people from different wine regions, different profiles, where companies share among themselves and with our community their experiences, the best they have done and that they know how. And this is also how we trigger, how we create more than a platform, we create a network of like-minded people. And today we're here for the fourth edition of the business sense of internalizing climate change. We know exactly why we repeat this topic every 3 months. That is very simple to us, but today, for a change, I chose a quote from a book to explain it. Our key to success lies in ensuring that everyone understands the nature is the true engine of our economy. This is from the Sustainability Puzzle. And as usually, we have invited different business leaders to share their path and strategy. Now, I'll start with Caroline. Caroline is the managing director for Europe from Accolade Wines. And just to mention two amazing projects that we're very keen to learn about from Accolade. One is the fact that their portfolio in Europe is carbon neutral, and I'm sure Caroline will dig into that. And they've recently joined, and just before that, for example, they are using the bottle of a member of ours, Garson Wines. We would also love to know how their experience is going. And also they joined very recently a project called Loop. And I invite you to look into it if you haven't already know it, which is a project that has managed to put in the same table, working together, giants such as Unilever. And the aim of the project is to have household goods from shampoo to toothpaste in reusable containers in your supermarket. So looking forward to hear about that as well. And I have Michele. Michele is the founder and CEO of Salketo. I can tell you that he's one of the most amazing people we've met. And of course, we have here as well, and Nicole is actually as well. They're inspiring people. Michele is also the co-founder of Equalitas. Equalitas is a sustainability program from Italy that is now spreading into other countries already, namely Spain. And to give you two examples of projects that I hope Michele will also tell us about. One of them is his glasses. I know this is weird, but his glass frames are made from waste. So they have a very aggressive approach towards waste, and I'm sure he'll share that with us as well. And another important success tool, I would say it like that, is that Salketo has been measuring its carbon footprint since 2009, way before carbon footprint even was a key term in our normal language, so to speak. And then we have Nicole, a force of nature. Nicole is all about connecting people, so we had to have her on our climate talk about the business sense of internalizing climate change, because she's all about connecting people. I mean, since we've met her, we've had a few conversations with her, and she's always connecting us to other people. So, and we believe in it so much because we can only do this together. And to give an example of how Chenbleu, which is the company, sorry, I almost forgot the company that Nicole leads. There's a project called Sustainability, that you can tell by the word that it has all to do with protecting bees. But the way this project was built, again, was all about cooperation and collaboration. So now that I've presented you these rock stars we have in front of us, let us go directly to our talk. And I'll start with the first question, and which is, how did you trigger climate action in your businesses? What were the very practical steps you took to address it in your company? And I'll start with Caroline.
Okay, I'll kick off. So, sustainability and climate action has always been a priority for our business, but I think it was always in pockets. So, for example, we've had Banrock Station, fantastic brand. We've got wetlands around the winery and the vineyards, which are in a trust, and we've been doing that for 25 years. But recently, I think we decided that we really want to take a leadership role as a big supplier globally, but also in Europe. So in terms of the practical steps to get straight into that, we made it one of our 6 strategic pillars in the European business, which is something that we talk about often internally and externally. And then probably the biggest first step, which I think Nicole will probably and Michele will probably talk about as well, is we actually needed to work out what our sort of environmental impact was. So we went through a footprinting exercise for our entire European business, and I think it was for a business of our scale, it was quite a big undertaking. But to understand, what the kind of the heat map of our impact, and to help us focus and prioritize, I would say that was probably one of the most important things that we set about doing as a team, and it really helped focus our minds on what we needed to change to make an impact. So I don't know if that tees up one of my fellow panelists to talk more, but I would say as a practical step, as a first one, that was crucial for us.
And then it will be interesting for you to tell us what did you in fact had to change, but we'll get there. Nicole, what about you? You're on mute.
Such beginner mistakes after we've all been on Zoom for so many months now. So I guess from the beginning, we had a very bottom-up approach, because the biodiversity at our site is exceptional. And we had this sort of holistic view of nature that we didn't have to back into, because it really came from my husband and his love of the land and his choice of that place because of its eccentric location in the heart of a UNESCO biosphere, with a crazy biodiversity, 1,400 species of butterflies in the biosphere, etc. And so he and his sister were very gung-ho for running the vineyard from the get-go. This is back 28 years ago when he purchased it, 25 years ago when I got involved. In this very sustainable way, because that was their whole philosophy. Now, her husband and I, who also got involved, we were very urban, had a lot to learn. I grew up in New York City. We didn't know much about biodiversity except pigeons and rats and cockroaches in Central Park. So for me, that was very exotic, and I had to learn everything. So luckily, we had Claude and Lydia Bourguignon, the very famous soil experts, from the beginning, and they were such pioneers in their day in this view of a sort of back to the future viticulture that gave us a huge head start on that area. Then we planted a bamboo forest to filter all the water from the winery, and the awareness of climate came much later as a kind of a connect the dots, because I remember, like some of you, I'm sure, seeing that movie The Day After Tomorrow in 2004. And I got very hot and bothered, and was thinking naively in retrospect, wow, well, that's such an intractable problem. Our politicians will have to figure that one out and call in the UN, but I'm sure they'll do such a good job. I don't have to worry my pretty little head about it. And then I had studied international affairs and worked in think tanks, and I tend to be a systemic thinker, very top down rather than bottom up. And so the exciting part was to really connect all the big picture thinking, which we do also through this think tank, which we can talk about, the Fine Minds for Fine Wines, and then the Irani Global Institute for the Future of Fine Wine, which I co-founded with Pauline Vicard, but to see how those things could come together in the linchpin that can connect the big and the small. And and find these ways of contributing to the bigger picture quite consciously, instead of just in a haphazard way managing our own little plot of land. So we're certainly hoping that the sustainability initiative will be not only a way to show how more bees can help make better wine, and we can talk about how that works, but also how it can be a roadmap for solving each one of these building blocks, where you're very hands-on in your vineyard and your winery, but you're also trying to tap your work into what other people are doing and what the governments are challenged with solving on a supranational level.
I would say, Nicole, that you mentioned two things that I would consider already tips for whoever is listening to us. On one hand, you can use two words, both the holistic and the systemic, because when you think systemically, you're looking at the whole thing as, and then you have building blocks, which you can look at it by building blocks, as the word says, and maybe that's a good way of starting and looking at each building block at each time, at least to start somewhere and start with one of it. And Michele, and these are two amazing, completely different stories, as you can see. Michele, tell us yours.
Well, I started approaching this new kind of business responsibility first, because that's exactly the first, let's say, move, internalizing responsibility into the business project itself, not just trying to, the first CSR was more about, doing something outside of your borders, which would be positively affecting society. But in this case, I really wanted to internalize it. And in fact, my first move was mainly in the process of building up a new cellar to make the company a little bit bigger and more efficient. I thought to challenge energy, because this was a big topic, the energy as a resource, a scarce resource, but energy as ideally when you're using it potentially polluting matter or issue. And then once I started this approach, I understood that we needed, of course, a parameter and a way to really measure the rating, to give a rating to what we were doing that could have a cause and effect connection with global challenges, environmental global challenges, if we really wanted to internalize this responsibility. And in fact, that's when the carbon footprint, the first carbon footprint that you mentioned, arrived, because we put together a group of, there were universities, research center that luckily understood the value of this idea, because our idea at first was to be energy independent. It's what we did with our cellar back in 2008-10 when we built up this new feature. At the same time, we wanted to understand what could be the measure, the indicator to measure, to rate our action. And so the carbon footprint at the time, as you mentioned, wasn't existing in terms of a standard, international standard. It came in 2013, but there was already within the frame of the 14,064 the possibility to make your general accounting, and within this general accounting we did the experimental first ISO certified carbon footprint of a wine bottle at that time. And in fact, from that moment, the snowball started to roll, and it's really, and a lot of things happened, because when you start opening the pot of the consciousness of what you're doing, in this case, in terms of climate impact, you start to understand what are your challenges. And by the way, that the first thing we understood is that the beautiful cellar in energy independence, super incredible, that everybody was already talking about at the time in Italy, was only solving a 15 to 20% of the problem. So in fact, we weren't very happy of the first result of the carbon footprint, because we understood that in fact the biggest challenge we had in front of us was, for example, related to packaging and specifically to glass. And that's why actually we started working quickly on this, and in 2013 we have embraced a completely new packaging in general, and particularly a new bottle, extremely light. It was 360 grams in 2013. This was really something innovative, and that's actually my story with carbon footprint. So it was a light to understand that there could be, and actually I'm still today so grateful, I think, to the community that before us in the 80s, 90s, under the umbrella of the United Nations, started to work with this vision that in the 2000 now is allowing us to make those measurements and to have such an incredible source of information to really be conscious of what we are doing.
Michele, you actually mentioned at one point, you said, we understood the value of this idea. And let me just ask you, was there a business value to the idea as well, or it was just the environmental value of the idea?
No, the business value, let's say that, if I understand well the question, we thought that in the long term, there couldn't be any other way to make business. Yeah. Okay, so that was clear. So, of course, we have probably, as we say in Italy, put the heart a little bit beyond the barrier, and we did put a lot of our own values and probably some risk into the adventure. But there were two things. First of all, we always understood since the very beginning that you could do it in a sustainable way, also economical. So in a sustainable way, because the sustainable way is also economical by definition. Yeah. And so it was really feasible. It was something that was not just the crazy thing to do, just to show off or or for the pleasure of yourself, with your own pleasure, let's say, as an entrepreneur or whatever. On the other hand, you could feel that since it was feasible, more than ever, you could understand that there was the long-term business value could be just a matter of time.
So I think from all of you mentioned how this process happened in your company, and it was never about climate change itself. It was never the concept of climate change. It was more a question of the environment as working hand in hand with the environment more than anything else. Although maybe Caroline spoke about the exact moment when the company looked at the commitments it had to do. And so let's start with you, Caroline. You spoke about, and I was going to ask you that, what were the changes Accolade felt it had to make to address these new targets, and what exactly were those targets?
So we decided almost 2 years ago that we really wanted as a European business to lead the way for our global business. And we decided that from consumer research that we needed to do something that was easily understood, but also really meaningful. So that's where the ambition to become carbon neutral came from. And obviously, as I mentioned before, the first step was, looking at our impact, looking at our carbon footprint, which was a really big piece of work that we undertook. And it's interesting, some of the other things that have been mentioned, we've always been quite proud as an organization. We have really sort of led the bulk shipping in bulk and then bottling in market to reduce the sort of carbon footprint. And we've been doing that for a number of years. But when we were looking at it, even though we're not transporting glass bottles a really long way anymore, just having the glass bottles and using heavier weight bottles was such a big part of our emissions, which I think we hadn't quite realized or internalized before. So then, as I mentioned before, understanding where the biggest impact was in our whole sort of business model really helped us to focus and prioritize. So we kind of set the ambition, and we worked out almost and maybe it was a scary way around, like we set the ambition, then we worked out what it would take. So we did it that way around, which I think there is always an element of sort of taking risks when you believe something's the right thing to do. And then we sort of looked at the biggest way to make an impact. So we went and were very brave in terms of our bottle lightweighting strategy. We thought that that was a very quick way to make a difference. We made sure we were shipping as much in bulk as possible, but we also looked at alternative formats. So you mentioned our partnership and collaboration with Garçon, which is the recycled PET flat bottle. So putting some of our very mainstream well-known famous brands into a new format like that would hopefully encourage people adopting something a bit different for the wine category. So that's something that we've worked on. I'm very passionate about the sort of what we call wine on tap, or lots of people would know as bag in box, as another really efficient way to sell and consume wine. So we kind of went through pretty much every part of our business model to see where we could make changes and what we needed to invest in. We've obviously got a huge bottling facility in Bristol, which is called the Park. That's got a beautiful, I love it. It's got a massive wind turbine. As you walk in, you can't miss it. So you can see, we're really trying to go after our renewable energy. And then there is, like, to be really transparent, there is a certain amount of emissions, when we're looking at scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions that are unavoidable at this time. So we can put ambitious targets in, and we are working on every single piece of it, but there is an element where we've decided to offset the remaining emissions. So that is something which we've been very considered about. We've got really good partners where we work through on that. And we've chosen projects that are close to our communities, so where we grow wine or where we sell a lot of wine, to try and make sure that that's quite meaningful as well. And obviously very well run projects that we can be very proud of and communicate to our consumers as well. But that's how we've kind of done it, is we've kind of gone through, reduced everything we can. We've got big ambitions to keep on reducing emissions, and then with the emissions that are remaining, we're offsetting those in projects that are close to our hearts and close to our communities.
I think several things that you mentioned, Caroline. The first, starting with the last thing you mentioned, carbon offsetting is a very hot topic.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you say that you chose projects close to your communities, which I think is it's a good choice, at least because it brings value to where you are and where you're growing. And I know, actually, something that I didn't mention that you did, that you are a very much consumer-driven organization. So you have lots of data. I'm sure that's something that you invest a lot on. And I was wondering, once you did the shift to lighter weight bottles or to different packets like wine on tap or Garçon wines, how did your consumer react? I'm sure, did you investigate afterwards? Did you do research in regards to that, both from a qualitative and quantitative
we have done a lot of research. We do a lot up front to sort of make sure we're making the right decisions. I think something that comes through loud and clear, and wouldn't be a surprise to anybody listening today or my fellow panelists, is that there is quite a big education job to be done. So a lot of people know that they can do curbside recycling with glass, and therefore think that glass is the best ever, whatever weight it is. So when you then give a plastic bottle as an alternative, it really is confusing for some consumers. So we do run on consumer insight, and we know that consumers really care about the topics of the environment and sustainability. But if you only base your decisions on current consumer sentiment, you might not be able to make the progress that we need to make. So then the job becomes about educating some of the things to help adoption. And that's where sort of, I mentioned before with our Garçon bottle, putting a really the number one brand in the UK into that new format hopefully helps adoption, and then you can tell the story, explain why it's better. But it's not always consumers leading the way. Sometimes you need to help take consumers with you because they want to make the right decisions, but sometimes they don't know, because it's confusing. It is a confusing area at the moment. They don't always know what the right decisions are. So that's where, we do have a responsibility to help educate.
We do, and hopefully we'll be able to touch on that, because that's a really, really important point where producers can do more in general, actually. Michele, you've already mentioned some of the what you started with. You mentioned your winery with the energy self-sufficiency. You mentioned, you started with equalities quite a few years ago, and you mentioned also that you felt the need of measuring. Was this key to further measures? Was this really important? For example, you mentioned that you soon realized that, if I didn't understand you correctly, that the bottle was a problem. Was it easy to shift in a time where nobody was lighting the bottle?
Well, no. Actually, it's very interesting to listen to Caroline and Caroline, and also imagine that the challenges that they endured, and the braveness to endure them when you have a big turnover already in place and a solid, balance sheet in place to think of a turnaround because of those purposes of growing your environmental, let's say, rating and results. Well, we had a similar problem, by the way. We tried, because at first, when we understood about the packaging, we tried to explore alternatives, PET, bagging box, aluminum, or we made those studies with our working group, and quickly we were finding so incredible, improvements, potential improvements possible by changing switching from glass to those alternative packaging. But we even tried to propose something to the market, but in our specific niche of the market, we are just ultra premium luxury. We are only in this market, and for us it was nearly impossible, not only for the product that need to be refined and aged, but also for maybe a product that is consumed within the year after the bottling. Let's say consumers were totally negative to these issues, and the problem of education is also today more than ever. It's a problem of making people understand that for a lot of product, the quality of the experience is the same. And so they should. That's another big education challenge that I think we still have today. We actually retried to introduce, and we have now in our portfolio, a bagging box last year in full pandemic. We say now it's the moment. The pandemic is going to change a little bit the views, and it's a shake up, and there was a lot of more and more talks about sustainability. We felt it right away. The idea that everybody was turning their view into the direction of sustainability, consumer, supply, distributors, importer, restaurateur, whatever. And so we launched quickly in a few months what we had already in our let's say closet, the bagging box, for instance. But anyway, to come back to your question, it was challenging. Consider that I think that at first, the first years, when we had a lot of contents related to sustainability, we were talking about them. They were giving us reputation, and from the value chain, from the media, everybody was saying you're great, you're cool, but nobody was buying us for this. And so we quickly understood that our message needed to be different. And I still believe that this was a good lesson. And let me just quickly try to materialize this message. The message is that a wine doesn't have to be sold, wine, for example, but any product, I would say, because it is sustainable or because it is environmentally more friendly. It needs to be sold. It needs to be sold because it is a great product in its category for the service that it provides and the price quality ratio it can express, and because at the same time it is sustainable. So I think that this is, and so we quickly understood that this was anyway the message. So basically at the beginning, we gave much more attention to all the rest anyway, because it was our story anyway. And we tried to embed the sustainable part, or all the things that we could talk about, in a way that would be very compelling with the rest. For example, if you look at our label, there is a scene that talks about a holistic vision of nature and wants to express some kind of harmony between in the relationship between man and nature, but it wants to be sexy and sober and elegant and farming style and etc. So it wants to be wine, and not dramatic and not an environmentalist lesson and blah blah blah. This is the thing, and this was a key to success. But again, I repeat, at the very beginning, no, there was no any kind of really answer from the market to all those topics. But I can also say that today it's a much different story. I still believe that we don't have to make it dramatic and we don't have to make it the first message, but it is much, people are people, the value chain. Because, for a long time, the value chain has been also a barrier. Let's be clear. Nobody was prepared, neither the distributor, the wine shops. Nobody was really came, and nobody was really prepared. Today, everybody is trying to catch up. So I think that any education in this direction and any offer in this direction would be much easier now than before.
And your story has been told since the beginning, which should make it easier for you as well, I would say. Anyway, but we'll get back to that. Nicole, I would say that listening to Michele and Caroline, you come from a very different place in terms of story of Chandler and the way you approach things. And building on cooperation, as I mentioned. And one of the things we read about Chandler was that it wanted to be sort of a living lab, so to speak, of other wine producers that would like to phase out chemical use, for example. So tell us about your side. It was not about changing well, for you, it was a change, as you mentioned, it was a huge change. But how did that happen in the company, in Chandler?
Wow, well, we had a lot of challenges on every front at once. To be honest, it hasn't exactly been easy because first I caught the winemaking bug from my husband and family, and then I caught the ecology bug from my husband, and then of course from environmental sustainability, the social sustainability was very easy because I came from Manhattan. It was hardwired into my thinking that there's so much value to having that kind of diversity. And so, yes, it's true. We're in the middle of nowhere in France. We have an incredibly diverse team, whether it's race, religion, nationality, sexual preferences. And so for some local French people, when they come to us, it's a bit like going to the zoo because it's not a diverse environment. And so in that sense, don't forget, we're in the heart of Le Pen territory. And so I think the best thing there is to just lead by example. And that was quite easy because we're very upfront with people when we hire them, that they're going to be in this very multicultural environment. And if it's not their kind of thing, then they shouldn't pursue an opportunity with us. But when we transitioned onto, making sustainability a really self-enclosed concept and not just something that was part of our normal ecological modus operandi, and then taking on carbon and all the other questioning and projects that are entailed, especially with certification, which I think many of you have been through that process. I think we found ourselves in that classic situation that probably many of the other people on this call are in, which is that we were convinced we had to do something, but we had no clue how we're going to start climbing that mountain, let alone convincing the other people on the team to do it. So I was very lucky. I teamed up with a very dear Austrian friend of mine who's a top consultant, Katja Klopf. She also is passionate about ecology. And so we started looking at this space to figure out how to go about certification and who we should go with. We wasted tons of time, tons of senior management time that could have been put into all sorts of other immediately commercial decisions and actions. So that was really bad. And I'm hoping that the work you're doing is going to help everybody not have to go through what we went through in that sense. But once we made it through the quagmire of certification options, and then only to find ourselves more recently changing the exact thing that we decided to do, which was to go down the B Corp path. We did do this B Corp self-assessment, which I think is a very good place for everyone to start. It's very comprehensive, it's free, and it gives you, the benchmarks that you probably find in most of these certification things. We've now changed over to Positive Luxury, which we're really excited about. When we put it to the team, I'll never, the monthly meeting, I never forget their faces, because about 2/3 of them started acting really annoyed. Oh God, here goes Nicole with another one of her crazy projects, more work, what do we have to, what's it gonna be this time? That kind of attitude, which was very hard. Because the irony, and I think this is true for all of us in many areas, which is that it's a bit like the story of the little red hen, right? We all want change, but nobody wants to do the work and the money and the effort to make that change. And so they're very proud to work in a place that has this whole belief system, but nobody wants to add more hours to their day or have to rethink stuff that they've been doing a certain way. So what we did is we kind of identified the people on the team whose eyes lit up. There were about 1/3 of them who got very excited at this meeting. And then we did a bit of divide and conquer, sort of cornered those people and tried to figure out what it was that they were excited about. And I was very lucky that my COO number 2 there is a true believer in this stuff. And it was very helpful that the two of us have been hiring new people that have already that hardwiring to be gung-ho about this project, rather than really try to change so much the ones who've been dragging their feet, because there's so much work behind the scenes that's involved, right? I think anyone who's been with it you have to do those horrible contact to all your suppliers and find out who's doing what already on sustainability, to have your ratios, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to get the accountant to make the list of all the suppliers and then write the letter and then send it to everybody and then keep all the stats. And so we kind of tapped into the niche micro skills of the individual people on our various teams that we thought could be matched with the types of projects that needed to be done, sub-projects within these bigger certification agendas. And that, I think, was a good way to get the machine going. Now it's much easier because as the culture changes, it's easier to take the laggards with us. And then the bigger challenge is still on the outside, like you talked about, educating people. But I find that we're only in the very high end side of the wine market, a bit like Michele. We have a challenge that we have because of the style of wines we make and the price points, etc. We have very seasoned collectors sometimes who still have a traditional mindset where it either tastes really good and has all the benchmarks of fine wine, or it's sort of ideologically pure and organic and natural, and then it doesn't age well, it doesn't taste good, and so we have to wait for those people to have their aha moments, that they can have their cake and eat it too, and show them, wait a minute, you can make wines that qualify as really fine wines by all their traditional definitions, but also are really respectful of the planet, especially in the vineyard and vineyard management, and also really respectful of the health and well-being of the consumers in the winery. It's very very hard to aim for that little intersection in the Venn diagram between those three things. And yet that's, in my view, the sweet spot. And I don't think the wine trade has fully adjusted either. There are too many journalists, too many trade people who come all the way up our little mountain. And I'm sure they're doing the same everywhere else. And they have this opportunity to ask all these important questions about our practices and our mindset. And instead, they're still asking very 90s questions about, the barrel work and whatever. And nothing wrong with that. But, we've moved on. It's the 21st century. The consumers have changed. How many more times you have to answer a question about the barrel work? I'm very proud of our barrel work. Nothing wrong with our barrel work. But, wakey, time to update that classic list of questions that you're asking wineries when you're assessing whether they make the cut. So I think we have a lot of battles on many fronts.
At the end of the day, it's about a word all of you said, which is education. And it's not just education of the consumer, it's the education of new influencers, so to speak, that can be the retailers, for example, education of retailers. It's education of all the stakeholders. And in fact, Nicole, you have spoken about part of your stakeholders. Actually, you've answered that question. Michele, how did you engage your team, or you didn't even have to because it came since the beginning of the organization? Or for example, when you changed the bottle, was it just about the retailers and the consumer, or was it also about your own team? How did you engage them in this mindset?
Well, I have to say that just like Nicole at the beginning, it was a dictatorial imposition, and great. I'm sorry to say discussion, and then, but okay, I have to say that it was very, very quick to get the engagement when everybody understood that it was possible and that it was giving result, and also that it was creating, as I say, attention and reputation, because way before the market responded, there was this feeling that people were anyway looking at you and say, oh, you're doing the right thing. Okay, maybe they were considering you like a dreamer a little bit, but who cares? There were still a lot of consideration. So this created engagement also within the company, and so I mean it was very quick when you would see example of ideas and coming from the inside at any level in any situation, because what was really also interesting was to show that there was really an expectation of coherence in our approach, So I remember this scene after just in the first years when we were accounting carbon footprint and doing things and biodiversity indexing and a lot of other efforts, because the snowball, as I said, of how also to measure ourselves got bigger very quickly. We did the water footprint in 2011. Since 2012, we were experimenting first and then embedding this into the Qualitas project too, the biodiversity index, and for example, I saw a change in any small purchase that people were suggesting to a new product that had a different environmental declaration, up to all the way to the sponge boat for the booth in Vinitaly at the last minute. I mean, there were a lot of examples in this sense, and so yes, I was quickly extremely proud of this engagement. And let me also add, just out of your question, but also following what Nicole was saying, I mean, the very first issue is also to understand in which framework you can move. So have a kind of address and guideline of your efforts and investments or whatever. Because as I always say, it's not a matter of investing necessarily, but it's a matter of changing your attitude and be ready to change and to innovate. And so in this sense, you can move choices that are not necessarily cost effective or requiring any investment, but you need this framework. And in our case, since we were a little bit earlier than the average, let's say, we had the problem of creating those parameters in this guideline, as I mentioned, for the carbon footprint, and also the Qualitas experience, because Qualitas is not of course, my creation, but I took part since the very beginning, even the years before, to the building up of this project and to the write down of the standard. And it was, we're talking about 2013, 14 for the forum that for 2 years with tens of institutions participating. We created let's say a great overview of any standard existing and blah blah. And then in 2015-16 the company was created in the umbrella, under the umbrella of the Federation of the Italian Consortium, and with other technical partners, and the standard was put down on ground and then started to be diffused in the value chain. Well, so our problem was to create a standard, because today there are standards valid and interesting. There are great framework. B Corp is mentioned, is one. Equalitas is, I think, great.
And you are a B Corp. You are a B Corp company. Yeah,
actually, we are a benefit corporation. So we transform, since Italy, just like some countries some states in the US and like France now with the, now I don't remember the name, but anyway, France followed also. But Italy was the first country in Europe to establish the kind of the benefit kind of corporation. So we transform into benefit corporation. We have been also certified B Corp for before the benefit corporation arrived. But of course, since we have Equalitas, which is a bit more complete for wine and also made up to be certified by third party, which is, I think, also important. But we use Equalitas as our standard to measure, to make our yearly reporting, which is a requirement for a benefit corporation, and public reporting in this sense, and in general, as I was saying, is a framework to orient ourselves. So I completely agree with what Nicole was saying. You know, and today it's much easier. One of the first things to do is trying to find at least a first framework. Then your experience will grow and will be much more important than the framework, because this is going to happen. You're going to find, to innovate, and even toward the frameworks that you have run, because it becomes a how can I say, like a vice. Sustainability becomes this kind of vice. You can't live without, because you want always to go further and you look for a new solution and so on.
Thank you, Caroline. I can only imagine, and I think Michele mentioned that, how daunting it must have been to measure the carbon footprint of a company such as yours, even if it's European branch. And talking about stakeholders, you've spoken about consumers, but how was it engaging people in these so ambitious targets that you did, taking into account the size of your organization, not just the extra work they had to do to measure it, but the ambitious targets that you set? How did you engage them? How did it go with retailers, for example, since we've spoken about consumers, but I think we need to, if we have time, it would be good to speak about consumers as well. Retailers, how did you tell them we're going to change packaging? How did you engage these stakeholders and suppliers as well, of course?
Yeah, I'll start with the internal, and I wonder if a lot of our efforts, like a lot of the really big efforts and the big sort of progress that we've made, has been slightly more recent, maybe compared to my panelists. So what I've found is that we kind of wanted to go on this journey, and then we felt this huge groundswell of support from everyone who worked in the organization, where it felt like it's almost like catching a wave, where people were so proud to work for a company that were trying to do something and were big enough and had scale where it felt really impactful, and maybe slightly surprised that we were going about it. And I think that really helped. It's helped our engagement massively in terms of the team, and there's been a lot of passion, and there's been a huge amount of willingness to go the extra mile, and to ask the right questions, and to think. Just seeing the creativity in terms of certain solutions coming through has been really refreshing and rewarding. So I don't know if that's just because of the timing of it. We already had all this passion in the business and we just seemed to catch it and off we went. So internally, the support has been incredible. Even for those really at the kind of the brunt of the hard work, they've always brought so much passion to that. And we had to monitor so much anyway, you know, when you've already got so many things that we're certified and we have to check this and we have to, you know, give this information to this customer and whatever. It was kind of trying to get all of the information into the right place, into a way that was manageable for us to sort of fit into a framework. And we did work with partners as well to really help us with that. So we worked with the Carbon Trust in terms of putting together models to help evaluate certain parts of the footprint. Looking more externally in terms of asking about retailers and customers, I have only been pleasantly surprised by the reaction and the support and to be honest, the time. You know, Nicole, you kind of referenced it in terms of the management time taken up and all the rest of it, but the amount of time from the most senior people at our customers and how they're willing to dedicate it to projects that maybe are small in comparison or relative to their business unit, because they know how important this is. And yeah, that's massively impressed me, where it's been pushing on an open door where the appetite for trying different things and solutions and for understanding and pushing boundaries is, I couldn't fault it. I've only had amazing positive experiences with our retailers on that, which really feels like, you know, now is the moment to be trying to make sure there's no barriers left.
Wow, that's quite inspiring, and it's a good message for everyone's around. Asking you something that before going into education, we have a question here from the audience. It's not exactly from the audience, it's one that we received in the registration, which is, does our organization have a shared definition of sustainability in which business will operate within social and planetary boundaries?
So I can take that one first. So at the moment, we're working on our overall sort of global ESG strategy, because I think what we've had at this point is probably something that's not very ambitious, but not as well defined as we would like. And we've also had separate strands. So we've, you know, kind of our diversity and inclusion piece and then our sustainability piece. And actually, I think we've got to the stage where we need to put it together and look at it holistically. So that's actually a work in progress for us. And I think Michele mentioned it. It's like a vice where as soon as you start on this journey, there's always more, and you can keep on pushing and it gets bigger and bigger. So that's where just trying to define it is really helpful.
Michele, I know you've told us several times, or at least twice, that you're going more even than environmental, you're going to the social concern, so to speak. So I think this question is quite broad and is good for you as well. And I'll ask it to Nicole as well.
Well, yeah, you know, I think it was a good vision too. When a few years ago we put down on the standard and on the table the need to, and I mean for agriculture, it was an innovation to try to start drawing down indicators that could define a social sustainability within our industry, and I'm very, very happy that since the beginnings we approached sustainability in this normally full and real way, because there cannot be, you know, the difference between what happened in the late 80s, again under the umbrella of the United Nations, is that we understood that we needed to create a new global vision for the management of our ecosystem and its interaction with society. And the big difference was that we have put man in the middle of this vision, and we have created a dynamic let's say, management, and because the point is that we have to care about the wellness of people, of the social global society, and to do it now, today, tomorrow, and after tomorrow. So this is the time framework. So yes, I'm very happy, and still today I have this duty in Equalitas, and to invest and to progress the culture of social sustainability in the value chain, and to increase and improve our standard. And it's the same thing that we have done at the winery. Just to make some examples, we started investing in a welfare plan for our employees already in 16, 17, and we have it in place since then. We have tried to work tirelessly on a way to manage with more transparency and our labor contracts and the careers behind them, and let's say we created the sharing of decision between employees and management, codified. We have created codified again. Also management of the outsourced labor, because this is important in our value chain. We have a lot of outsourced labor, and this is as you know, a very sensitive part, especially when you are in the more southern country, operating in more southern countries around the Mediterranean. We know this is a topic, and it's something that markets are looking more and more. I mean, you can,
and retailers as well, yeah.
Exactly, not unveiling. There are still studies that alert about what's happening, everywhere around the farming in the Mediterranean, including wine, and so it's a topic, and I think that it's just the normal evolution. Maybe today we're still having more talks about the environmental challenge and climate, and I understand it, because it was the biggest need in the 90s, 2000. We understood quite clearly, everyone understood quite clearly that there was a bigger challenge, more probably a little bit more urgent and hot topic in climate and in general in the biodiversity management and, let's say, in environmental management. But it cannot. It's a matter of, again, coherence and common sense, that we cannot exclude the social dimension, especially the labor dimension in this vision.
Nicole, since you mentioned holistic and systemic, I believe that this question is easy for you. Do you have a definition of sustainability with the planet and social boundaries in your company, in Shenble?
No, we don't have anything codified like that. It's a tiny organization, and it's not.
You don't need it.
I really admire Caroline's ability to scale all this stuff, because that's a challenge for every aspect of the business, not just the sustainability part. Whenever you have any good things going, scaling them is a whole different skill set, which is a challenge I haven't been faced with. So we don't have anything in writing, except that at the heart of our whole belief system is our motto, which is on our labels, at the bottom of every label, which is non mihi non tibi sed nobis, not mine, not yours, but ours. And it infuses everything we do to have this harmonious relationship between the vineyard and the forest. We have a completely seamless integration. We have bees' nests and birds' nests and beehives spontaneously in the vineyard, and snakes and lizards and all that stuff. There's really that has to work very, very symbiotically. And then between humans and the vineyard and nature, and then within our teams, and then with our clients, it's a way of thinking about everything around this famous 80-20 rule, which is that you're always looking for the 80% of stuff that you have in common with the other, whatever the other is, and not obsessing about the 20% where your needs are different. And if you build every relationship around that, you have a much better chance of doing that. And it's a form of it's a philosophy of life. It's a mental practice. And then if you really take that approach every time you sit down with someone or when you try to solve for something, then the answers kind of come from there. So I guess it takes us to that whole thing of cooperation and the win-win that comes from having a very collaborative, cooperative approach that doesn't limit itself to your relations with other human beings.
Thank you. So just before I put on your slides, I really want to just to touch a little bit on education. I know our time is running. Michele, you mentioned that, and that's interesting, that even today you don't think that the story to the consumer should focus on sustainability, but rather on your product along with the sustainability. Do you think there is but overall, do you think we still have to educate all our stakeholders, because we're all consumers, we're all people at the end of the day, about why products need to be produced in a more sustainable fashion, in this case, not only environmental, but socially and economically? And how can you do it?
Well, as I said before, I think it's evident that there is an incredible switch. I don't know how to find which words to find to describe it, but things are changing. It's evident that things are changing quickly. This pandemic has put in place mechanisms that are changing visions very quickly. And to where I want to say, what I simply want to underline is that it seems like it's going to be easier to provide new messages. So I think that the education is still necessary. So I answer to your question, yes, we need to keep educating. Luckily, it looks like this education will be more effective. That's my feeling. So, and probably it's going to be finally a momentum in which we may be also, let's say, neutralize those other problems we have in our value chains, which were mentioned by Nicole. For example, saying that, fine wine has some kind of signs like the heavy bottle, or just to mention something extremely simple, or anyway needs to talk a specific language which can be only diluted or by any other message, and it's funny because the example we all make of DRC of the finest, the most expensive probably wine in the world, which has silently been very sustainable in its entire life, is the proof. So, but it's the same story of every one of us. I remember when I was certified, we were certified organic years before we were telling it to the crowd, because it was something you needed to hide. Because it was a shame in the wine industry to be organic at the beginning. So you were organic. No, I'm not organic. No, I'm not certified. It's not true. It's not me. That was imagine the change. And so now we have the chance to be even more effective in this process of clearing a lot of let me say bullshit in our industry related to the barrel things we were mentioning. I mean, barrels are very important. I think we have to be extremely serious in our technical approach and in the beauty of our quality of our experience, because the experience remain a lot related to what you do with the barrel. In a way, I don't want to say something different, but there has been signs that have been, exaggeratedly exacerbated. I don't know, and today we can also create an experience which is more true and more complete. I think this is the chance that we have in front of us.
Thank you, Caroline. You come from a consumer-driven. I've mentioned this before. Do you think there's a lot of education to be done? still, although you've had this wonderful experience with retailers, with all the whole value chain, I mean, that's amazing, but do you think there's still need to educate?
Yeah, I think there's definitely still a need to educate, and I think that is one of the things that retailers are so keen to work on solutions with us on, is working out how best to communicate some of these
Consumers.
Yeah, to consumers, and we have to partner and work on it together. So they definitely need to educate more and take people on the journey. But I think everybody in the value chain wants the same thing, and perhaps, you know, I think that really is the moment is now compared to when you were having to hide your organics.
Yeah, your organic
years ago. So yeah, which is good news, but it obviously can't come fast enough.
Nicole, you've answered that question when you said that even journalists, even media has to update their speech and the questions they've done. So not to take more of your time, I'll just share the screen with what we asked from each of you, because you are business leaders, to give takeaway messages to other business leaders listening to us. So we start with Michele. Michele, these were your recommendations. Can you share them instead of me reading? Or
okay, well, yeah, you know, in a way, we went through all this during the conversation and gave really practical examples, all of us. But change your attitude to decision making. Everything you do can make the difference in every corner of your process and your company and your networks. There is a solution. Let's put it this way, to be contemporary in every corner of our everyday decisions and making processes. And then be prepared to innovation and not necessarily to investments, as I said before. The change is not necessarily something that requires money to be invested. Not necessarily. There are things that can be done by just readdressing some decision, as for the point before. And then I am a believer of measurement. Okay, the example we have been an example because we. Once we started measuring, we understood what we could really do to make the difference. Especially because today the measurements are the database and the instruments and indicators are really sophisticated, and they really put you in touch with the global challenges and certify them. I think that the third-party verification is necessary for all of us to keep this clear from pressures or critics or any way to avoid cultivating misinformation or any way to avoid to try to decrease as much as possible people doubt about what we are talking about. I didn't find the right word because I can't really find it at this moment. But we also now more than ever in the next years we will be in front of the issue of people needing. The paradox is people will need more and more of these contents, but they risk to be exposed to so much misinformation too that the risk is that they will lose confidence on the possibility that this can be really done and how this can be really done.
That's a very good point. The misinformation that could lead to something that we're not going to talk about, which is greenwashing, but we'll not go there. Caroline, just to finish with the 3 takeaway messages and tips.
Top tips, I think we've covered them all and they are similar to others, but understanding your impact is a really great first step, just so that you can focus and prioritize. And I think even for a large company with a lot of information already, we did learn an awful lot from going through the process, which helped us make some good progress. I talked about the team. I'd hope that everybody be pleasantly surprised with how much engagement you get from really getting everyone in the whole business involved and getting their ideas and potential solutions. I think that's something that's helped us massively. And then we talked about education. It's really important. I think it links to a lot of the other points in terms of misinformation and maybe skepticism and cynicism, is if we can really think about our communication together as an industry and educate properly, we can hopefully take everybody on the journey to really make some proper progress.
Thank you. Here you are, Nicole.
Yeah, these were a little bit sort of pragmatic, just to recommending which kinds of self-assessments are a good place to start, because if you're like me and you don't know where to start climbing that mountain, at least you can't go wrong with these types of things. We worked with a wonderful consultant named Ascanio Vitali as well, who's a sustainability consultant for many businesses, not just wine. And I think you always learn a lot from people who are not just wine people. And then the climate USP. So, it's impossible to do everything and to do everything right. So just I recommend choosing one thing that's going to be easy and fun and where you're going to look good fast. And then one thing that's really painful, pain point, where you know that you have some skeletons in the closet and you have to invest a lot of time and money to fix them. So if you're working on your strongest point and your weakest point, then you have a place to start again. And then the collaboration that we talked about, I would only recommend more of that, because there's a bigger thing at stake here with the wine world. I think people, if you watch this documentary like Kiss the Ground, and you understand how agriculture in general can be the decisive factor in our future, because if we continue using all these chemicals and screwing everything up, then it will continue to be one of the largest contributors to carbon and climate change. But conversely, if we could do this heavy lifting and get everyone to the other side, it will be a big part of the solution. And for that, viticulture has a particularly important role, as Toby Webb likes to point out, which is that it's a very visible, one of the only forms of agriculture that's very B2C and not just B2B, and therefore we can be spokespeople for all that. We could really do more to educate than the people in the other forms of agriculture, even though we're only a small percentage of the overall agricultural output. And then, of course, my own project close to my heart, which is to get all winemakers to look seriously at using bees instead of chemicals. They'll boost yield, save money, and then make their wines have that greater sense of place, which of course is usually rewarded by the marketplace.
You're mute, Marta.
Sorry about that. I was just summarizing. Education, innovation, maybe sometimes is a replacement for investment or business. Financial investment, collaboration, education, taking people through the journey. And remember, when we talk about collaboration, that's what Puerto Protocol is here for, to unite the wine industry around climate action rather than just climate change, but around the solution, not the problem. And you talked about soils. That will be the topic of our next climate talk next month. The truth is we have not closed the panel yet, but we'll keep you posted on that. We didn't talk about various amazing projects, the sustainability in detail, the waste, the way Michele has a tool for biodiversity, and the way Salcetta looks at waste. We didn't talk about loop, which would have been great as well, but anyway, a chance will come. That's why we're here, to share solutions. And thank you very much for being here. Caroline, Nicole, Michele, thank you for participating. And thank you to our audience as well. Bye-bye.